fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
You are back in the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Miss Jennifer Peaches Ann Gordon is in the room, in the house.
In the house. My name gets longer every episode. Sometimes it's just Peaches, Jennifer Ann Peaches Gordon, Jennifer Ann Gordon Peaches. Who knows?
Well, it's going to be, the next interview is going to be Jennifer Ann Gordon Burlesque Peaches.
Oh my gosh. And then the one after that, Jennifer Ann Gordon Burlesque Demon Peaches. Demon. Mark at this point is like, how do I get out of this interview?
Yeah. No, he knows. He goes, he's
I get that a lot, Mark.
Come on. It's Stephen Mark Rainey. You couldn't ask for a bigger demon, right? Come on. How you doing, Stephen?
I am doing just fine, and actually you can call me Mark. All my friends call me Mark, and people who call me Stephen are usually looking for money.
Well, perfect.
Oh, so Stephen, tell us.
Yeah. That's
Stephen,
Yeah, it says it all, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, she's a burlesque dancer. Come on.
I'm a demon burlesque dancer.
Well, so yeah, she wants more than money. She wants your soul.
Oh, that's a good. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, write that down. So Mark, you've been working away, and now you've got a story in this new Hospital Haunts.
I do.
Yeah. So what's your story? What's it about? Like, what have you done in this book?
It is called Insensate, and the main character is one who instigated an incident that caused him great trauma. And he's been trying to deal with that, and then sort of out of the blue, he is contacted basically by something. He doesn't know what, so he goes to investigate, and it leads him to the object of the anthology, the Hospital of Haunts. And he has a series of experiences with some of the residents of this haunted hospital. I won't reveal more than that, but anyway, I hope that's enough to sort of pique one's interest.
Can you reveal which hospital room you are in and what time period?
It's in the time period. Let's see, 2018, I believe, is the time period, and it's in the rehab section of the hospital.
Oh, nice. Rehab was one of the rooms that I was like, ooh, that would be cool.
Yeah, there's this sense that it might be the place to get better and might get maybe a little too much better.
Oh, very nice. So did you already have like an idea for this story even before you thought about Hospital of Haunts or were asked to be part of Hospital of Haunts? Mm-hmm. Like, I know some people are like, oh, I've always wanted to write a story in a blah, 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 in a da-da-da.
No, I can't say that I did. Now, I've always had a fondness for ghostly scenarios and haunted places. The theme of the anthology just really hit home with me, and so when it came time to start plotting the story, it just wrote itself. It just went boom, boom, boom. And I will say this, it is actually based on a story I wrote a few years ago that appeared in a magazine called 34 Orchard. And although you certainly don't have to have read that story, the events in that story are what leads into the Hospital of Haunts tale. It is a standalone story. You need no existing knowledge, but if you have it, I think that tie-in might add a little extra perspective to it.
I love that. You know, I'm a huge fan of, authors who do kind of like Easter eggs within their own career. Like, this is the same location as I used in this story I wrote, 5 or 10 years ago. So you say that the events that happened in your previous story led into this one.
Those events...
Does it involve the same character?
It is exactly the same character, but a long time later. And the events of that first story, called Night Crier, are what led him to the trauma that he is suffering at the beginning of Insensate, the story in Hospital of Haunts.
I love that. So, do you think you'll revisit this character again? I mean, this is 2 stories. Is there something about him that's kind of getting under your skin?
I doubt it seriously, given where things lead in the Hospital of Haunts. I will say that without giving away much, the trauma comes as a result of of this young man's mother having succumbed to dementia, and a lot of the issues that he's dealt with are exactly the issues I dealt with for 5 years when my mom had dementia. I felt like it was one of the most emotional episodes of my entire life, where it was just absolutely traumatic to me. And I wanted to, as a catharsis, I wrote Night Crier. And so even though in a way those issues, there was a catharsis with Night Crier, and yet at the same time, that story seemed to open itself to a whole new rendering of events. And Hospital of Haunts could not have provided a better outlet for that. I think it like I said, it is a standalone story. There's enough of the background given that you need no prior knowledge of that tale. I just think that if one were to read both of those stories, they would flow seamlessly. Almost seamlessly.
Almost seamlessly. Well, now I really do want to read that first story so much. I mean, you just talked about, like, dealing with your mother's dementia. I think we're going into kind of a generation of writers who understand that.
Probably so.
We're of the age where, I know my mother has severe dementia, and I wrote a story for the first book in this anthology, too, House of Haunts, that was very much related to my mother, me taking care of my mother with dementia. And I think that's such a incredibly sad and terrifying place to write, because I think we're all scared of it.
Very much so. And I mean, that's a very real world fear. And what I did more so in the Hospital of Haunts story is carry that into the truly preternatural realm, just projecting the feelings and emotions. So they tell very different stories, even with that spark from the first tale. The second story goes in an entirely different, what I hope is a new and original direction.
So tell us, like, real briefly, a little bit about you, Mark Rainey.
Okay. I actually started writing fiction, mostly short stories, back in the mid-'80s when I was several years out of college. I sort of got the bug when I was in college because I like to write and draw scary things. And, you know, I got a degree in art, and I did a lot of horrific art, so I started wanting to tell little stories about the art that I was doing, and I moved more and more into the writing part of it. And I was certainly influenced by, H.P. Lovecraft and that circle of writers. I was very much into weird fiction, and I have been to this day, but I began with short stories and wrote quite a lot and had a good many published in the small press and started moving into bigger presses. And in the early 90s, I started, I tested the waters with a couple of novels, and they did pretty well. So then I wrote the Dark Shadows novel for HarperCollins that was co-written with Elizabeth Massey, and I think we did that in 1999. And after that, I've done a few more novels, but yes, I focus largely on short fiction. It's probably my favorite medium as far as writing fiction.
So in awe of really good short story writers, and I love to talk to people who love writing short stories. To me, I feel like that's the hardest thing to write. I love writing them, but it's just like so tricky. Did you find yourself struggling when you wrote novels the way I probably struggle with short stories?
To some extent. To me, I think I was acclimated to the form, the short form. It's something that I know I can start, finish, and very likely sell if it hasn't been done specifically for a book or a magazine. But a novel, the downside of that to me is that I don't multitask well. I don't start writing a novel and then take a break and write several short stories or even a short story or whatever. When I start a novel, I want to go whole hog into it, but I'm not a really fast writer when it comes to a novel, so it sort of feels like it takes me out of circulation for a while, and I don't like that feeling.
No, I understand that. I am also one of those authors that's like, I do one project at a time. Like, I am writing a book. Or that's why because I think when I write a short story, I have a certain amount of like panic days and weeks that go into that I have to build into the writing process, where I panic about the short story for 2 weeks before my fingers touch a keyboard.
Yeah. Another thing about short fiction, more so than a novel, is after I've finished it, it's so hot off my fingers and I just immediately want to send it to the editor, and that is the worst thing I can possibly do, because it takes me a couple of weeks to cool down from that, look at what I've written with a more objective eye, find the 2010 typos that I've made out of 2011 words, and make sure that the editor is getting, my first class effort, and that's not going to happen at the moment that story is hot off the keyboard, so that's always been a struggle too.
I feel like there should be an app or something that we can like put on our computers that stop writers from like the second their like last word type from sending it off someplace. Because I know I've done that with like literary journals and stuff where I'm like, this piece is done, send it to my dream publication, and I'm like, did I even read through that enough?
Yeah, I tell you, my old age, my brain works faster than my eyes, and my brain and my fingers go so much faster than my eyes do. So a lot of times I will have written a couple of sentences, and when I look at it, there's a missing word, sometimes two missing words. It's because my brain saw it, but the rest of me didn't. And I feel like I'm 65 years old now, and I feel like I'm worse at that than I used to be. So I have to take extra care to make sure that the brain doesn't betray me, before I send something out.
Listen, in short stories, you've got to accomplish a lot in a smaller space. You can't flesh things out, characters. You can't give a lot of history in the same way. What's your method of doing that? I guess it's probably you're going to say select words or something, but do you have a specific way of doing it?
Well, you practically took the words right out of my mouth. I try to do it concisely. I try to work in as much characterization, as much setting as possible within the confines of the short form. Many of my stories are somewhat longer, oftentimes between 5,000 and 8,000 words long, usually not in the 8,000 word range, because those are really hard to sell as a rule. But making sure that I with the economy of words, get as much context into the smallest amount of words as possible, because I like a rich reading experience, and I want to give a reader a rich experience that's not just nuts and bolts. And I think a lot of the short fiction that I do read a lot of times feels like it's too much nuts and bolts. It's all there. They've got a nice skeleton, but there's so much room to give me a more sensual experience, something that isn't just my eyes taking in what's going on. I want to feel. I want to smell. I want my heart to race. I want to feel all this stuff, and I feel like that is tougher in the short story form.
I wonder, is your experience writing a short story the same for you as when you're writing a full novel? And I mean that because when you're writing a full novel, you spend a lot of time with your characters, and you really get in depth with them, and you start to live through them. You really feel it, and that can affect a writer. It can change you by the end of the process. But does the same thing happen in a short story?
I don't think it does to that degree. Sometimes, as in the case I was telling you about Night Crier, I wrote that's not a very long story. I think it's about 3,000 words. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to move it farther, because I was engrossed in this little realm that I created for that character. And I felt like, okay, this story is done, but there's more in this virtual venue that I would love to do and I want to do. And like I said, the Hospital of Haunts was the perfect vehicle to extend my place in that little world that I'd created.
Do you like doing these anthologies, or do you prefer to write your own set of short stories and do it in a book? Like, what's the setup for you? What do you like best?
Some of both. When I do get anthology invitations, they're usually themed. There's, like Hospital of Haunts has its theme. I did a Lovecraftian superhero story a while back. I did one that it was very loosely themed, but it had to include witches. So I did a Revolutionary War story about an encounter with a witchy person. So when I'm working within the confines of some theme, I feel like I adapt to those very well. It focuses me real quickly. Sometimes if I'm just writing a story on spec, something that I'm wanting to do, and then send it out and hope somebody's going to buy it, those I actually love those dearly. I do, but I do have to work a little harder to find my focus, not let it go places that it ought not. The theme of an anthology really keeps it focused. Now, Nightcrier, that one I just wrote on my own because I needed that catharsis, and then I sold it to it was a small literary mag, and then I reprinted it when I put out my collection, Fugue Devil and Other Weird Horrors, back in 2022. That was that Fugue Devil Resurgence. Fugue Devil, that was an older book, but Fugue Devil Resurgence is the one that we talked about that on the last time I was on the show. So that Nightcrier is in that collection.
Yeah, when you do a full novel, there's always some sort of a subtext, some sort of a meaning, some sort of object to get one place to another, and you hope the reader gets it. Is it the same in a short story? Is it the same, or even more so?
Maybe. I feel like every time I start a new story, I'm looking at characters and plot and whatever subtext or whatever. I don't know that I write any kind of message into anything other than I hope this scares the fuck out of you. That's my message usually.
Yeah.
But those things do develop, and usually it's more organic. I rarely think, even with a novel, I rarely think about what something may represent. It's more, I'm looking at these plot points, I'm building this character, and so many times, and you've probably heard this from many writers, the characters dictate what you're going to say and where it's going to go. I have started so many things with one idea in mind, and the characters won't let me do it that way. I have to let them have free reign, and I think if there's any subtext, it's usually what the characters dictate.
I love that.
Yeah.
That kind of gave me chills, Mark. I'm sorry, Stephen, Mark. Sorry, I'm like, we don't want to forget about that money portion.
That's right.
Stephen Mark.
Well, I guess, because I don't do short stories, and I'm doing all nonfiction, but getting into the fiction world. But for me, whenever I see short horror stories, quite often, like the old Twilight Zones and some of these, there was always something they wanted me to get out of it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Do you do it that way, or do you not even care? You just
on occasion, I feel like each thing I write is a unique experience, and sometimes I will set out with a point to make. I kind of did that with Nightcrier. It's a little more difficult, I think, with themed anthologies because I'm writing for a theme, and they may not want some message that I feel might be otherwise important. But I would say it's just a mix. Some of my stories definitely have that point to be made attitude when going into it, and others I don't even know. I don't recognize that point until after the story is done. That's because all of the elements, and particularly the characters, they bring that home to me, and if it resonates with me, hopefully it's going to resonate with readers.
So what happens to your characters when you finish the book or the story?
Most of the time, they're gone, just out of mind, out of sight, but not always.
Well, I feel like your story in Hospital of Haunts proves that not always they're completely gone forever.
Sure. And I wrote a story that's just come out. I mean, it was actually released. The anthology was released on the same day as Hospital of Haunts. It's called Shunned Houses, edited by Catherine Karasman and S.T. Joshi, and it's very Lovecraftian. My house, my story is called The House at Blacktooth Pond, and that was one that when I finished it, honest to God, it creeped me out so bad. I don't think I've ever written anything that creeped me out so much, and I began to think this needs expanding. And there were hundreds of avenues within that story that could lead to expanded characters, more places to visit, more chills. And so my novel, the one I was just telling you that I was editing, is also called The House at Blacktooth Pond. And it is the same story almost. If you've ever read Ted Klein, T.E.D. Klein's The Events at Perot Farm, he expanded that into a novel called The Ceremonies. This would have been back in the 80s. And this is very much what I did. It starts with a common seed, and they both grow in the same direction, but the story, The House at Blacktooth Pond, is a bonsai tree. It is small and well-crafted, and it stands alone. But the novel, The House at Blacktooth Pond, becomes an oak tree, man. It's a big old thing, and has a lot more branches, goes a lot more places, and I'm really kind of excited about how organically that developed from that same little seed.
Yeah, it's amazing how that all happens, Well, so where do you go from here? I guess you're just doing this all the time, eh? You're like
almost always.
When do you sleep?
I retired from. Oh, I have a whole bunch of cats.
Oh, so never.
Yeah. It is so hard to sleep. That's close. But I retired from my day job a couple years ago, and since then I've been really focusing hard on being productive as a writer and an editor. For 10 years I edited Death Realm magazine back in the 80s and 90s, and last year I sort of resurrected it as an anthology that Shortwave Publishing put out. In fact, it became Shortwave's very first bona fide bestseller. It took a little time to get the momentum, but it has some of the hottest names in the business. I've got Joe Lansdale, Brian Keene, Elizabeth Massey, Ron Kelly. Just there's a catalog of great writers in that anthology. So that kept me really busy. Doing an anthology is a lot of work, so I tend to do those rather sparingly.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I'd rather focus on my own fiction most of the time, but I do really love being able to put together a really good outlet for other writers, and I respect editors immensely because I know exactly all the hard work that goes into it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's not always easy to connect and get a good editor either. Like when you find one, for me anyway, when I find someone that I connect with, man, you keep them. You keep them as long as you can.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, because it's great. Well, listen, let's talk about how people find Mark. Where do they find you? Do you have social media, websites?
Well, on social media, I'm primarily on Facebook. Once in a blue moon, I'll post something on X or Blue Sky, but I've never been drawn to the little quickie format, so I don't have much of a presence there at all. I should, I guess, because so many people do well with it, but that's not me.
No, do what you do. Get on TikTok and hang out with your cats.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like TikTok and all your cats on the bed while you're trying to write something spooky is viral TikTok material.
Yeah, I think
and I'm saying
well.
that as somebody who is not on TikTok.
And I am on TikTok, and I would
So
say
listen to Alan.
You would do well.
Okay. Just a real quick aside, I kind of get you on that because a few years ago, I was doing this fundraising thing for the Lymphoma Leukemia Society, and getting the funds raised was going real slow. So I have this cat named Drooly who I developed sort of a little presence for him because in his young days he was a real home redecorator. And so I went on Facebook and I posted Drooly's picture, saying, Dad not doing too well. Please help. And I actually set the record for donations because Julie brought all that stuff.
It's true. It's true. Well, we appreciate you being on, talking about the haunted hospital haunts, hospital haunts, and your story in there and everything else. And Mark Rainey, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and we'll be talking to y'all later on.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. Take care.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.